It's this constant, oh, it's the white man, it's the white supremacist, that's the problem. No, it isn't, Maggie Haberman. Go to Sinjar, go to the Middle East and tell me what the real problem is today. Go to Manchester.
That was Wednesday, and instead of Manchester, White House aide Sebastian Gorka could have simply gone to Charlottesville, Virginia, just 3 days later, where violence erupted when white nationalist and neo-Nazi protesters clashed with counter-protesters during their planned Unite the Right rally, with the white nationalist protesters reportedly using clubs and brass knuckles to attack counter-protesters, including members of the clergy. Several people were severely injured, and one woman was killed when a car rammed into the crowd. 20-year-old James Alex Fields was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, among other crimes. A Facebook account appearing to belong to Fields via BuzzFeed is riddled with white supremacist, Nazi, and now familiar Pepe the Frog memes popular with Trump supporters, as well as a picture of Donald Trump himself on a golden throne. Meanwhile, the man who said that white supremacists are not the problem is named Sebastian Gorka, of course, and he works in the White House. Now, you may be wondering, what exactly does this guy do to earn his $155,000 taxpayer-funded salary? Well, here's what we know. Sebastian Gorka's title is Deputy Assistant to the President. He works with Steve Bannon. His credentials include writing Breitbart.com's blog post on national security. He apparently has a problem with pajamas.
The message I have, it's a very simple one. It's a bumper sticker, Sean. The era of the pajama boy is over January 20th, and the alpha males are back.
Poor pajama boy. He has a PhD from a questionable university in Budapest, but insists on being referred to as Dr. Gorka. He considers himself a counterterrorism expert, but most actual experts didn't know his name until a few years ago. Didn't know his name even a few years ago. He tried to join the National Security Council, but was denied a security clearance. And he has ties to ultra-right groups in Hungary, including Vitezi Rend, which is directly descended from actual Nazis. Look, here he is, proudly wearing their pin. There he is. Gorka denies any ties to that group and claims he only wore the pin as a tribute to his dad. Oh, and this is what he had to say about the recent firebombing of a mosque in Minnesota.
There's a great rule. All initial reports are false. You have to check them. You have to find out who the perpetrators are. We've had a series of crimes committed, alleged hate crimes by right-wing individuals in the last 6 months that turned out to actually have been propagated by the left. When you've had people fake hate crimes in the last 6 months with some regularity, I think it's wise, don't you, to find out what exactly is going on.
You catch that? He called an attack on a mosque a false flag. And this is the guy with the president's ear, the guy who said just days ago that white supremacists are not the problem. Joining me now, Karine Jean-Pierre, national spokesperson for MoveOn.org, Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank, MSNBC correspondent Gabriel Sherman, and Kurt Bardella, former media consultant for Breitbart.com. Thank you all for being here. Kurt, I'm going to go to you first because you're the most familiar with Breitbart World, which is where Sebastian Gorka came from. According to Rolling Stone, Gorka, who describes himself as an expert in Islamist terrorism, but who has never lived in an Islamic country and does not speak Arabic, described Sunni and Shiite Muslims this way while writing for Breitbart. Today, the global jihad has two brands, he wrote for Breitbart. It's a war of Sunni Coke versus the Shia Pepsi. How does that person claim to have any credentials to advise the President of the United States on national security?
Well, I think you already highlighted how his credentials are a little questionable. He has basically the equivalent of a mail-in degree from a third-rate university in Budapest. It's like getting a doctorate from the Trump University, really. That's how credible that is. But really, this is someone who I believe aligned himself with Steve Bannon, was able to ingratiate himself to him by using inflammatory rhetoric, perceiving to share the same worldview of hatred and fear, and this absurd notion that America is being overrun by Muslims and immigrants, and it's going to be the destruction of our state as we know it. And when Steve went to the White House, he surrounded himself with like-minded allies like Seb Gorka, also like Julia Hahn for that matter. And here we see the consequences of surrounding yourself with those type of people and how they're advising the president, and then how the president responds to an act of domestic terrorism by white supremacists and racists yesterday with that pitiful statement that he put out. Where do you think that came from? They are bending over backwards to try to not say something is a racially motivated act of domestic terror. And you know, it's interesting. They're so quick to jump to conclusions and judgment when it was President Obama. There was no, oh, let's wait for the facts. Let's not do a guilt by association. And remember the vicious attacks against President Obama during the Reverend Wright situation. Where was that restraint then? Now that the shoe's on the other foot, they want to sing a completely different tune, and it's completely hypocritical and double standard.
Yeah, and I should note that the White House did attempt, they are now attempting to sort of do a rolling walk back of Donald Trump's sort of rather mild statement yesterday that didn't include any individual specific names. This morning, they put out a statement that says the president said very strongly in his statement yesterday that he condemns all forms of violence, bigotry, and hatred. And of course, that includes.
You notice how it's always
whites.
someone else saying that, but not Donald Trump?
Not Donald Trump. But they did say it includes. At least they're including them now in the universe of baddies, white supremacists, KKK, neo-Nazi, and all extremist groups. He called for national unity, bringing all Americans together. So that's nice. Dana Milbank, it is interesting that, you know, and I used to blog, so I don't have anything against bloggers, but you do have this sort of blogger contingent in the White House between Bannon, who ran the Breitbart blog, Gorka, who's a blogger. He's never lived in an Arabic. He doesn't speak Arabic. He's never lived in a Muslim country. He's their expert. He was fired from a gig that was talking to FBI. He used to lecture the FBI. He would lecture the FBI, his employees on counterterrorism issues, but they had to fire him because of his anti-Muslim diatribes. How does somebody like this get past the door? I know he doesn't have a security clearance. How is he in the door?
Well, I mean, we're talking about somebody who is dramatically unqualified to be serving in the position he's in. I can think of somebody else in the White House who is dramatically unqualified to be in the position he's in. Now, and in fairness, there have been people in the White House saying, this guy doesn't belong here. So even in Steve Bannon world, they're saying this goes too far. There's one guy, however, for whom he doesn't go too far, and that's the President of the United States. And I think in some ways, Gorka is sort of the id of the president. He does what the president does, but he's even more outrageous. He's even less tethered to the facts. You know, for example, talking about how you know, white nationalists are not the problem; they're Muslims. When violence by white supremacists is an order of magnitude higher since 9/11 than it has been. So I think it is Trump's id sort of out there, and that's why he's still in the White House.
And you know, Karine, one of the reasons that Donald Trump reportedly likes Sebastian Gorka is that he likes the way he is on TV.
That's exactly right.
Right? And so let's play a little bit of Sebastian Gorka. Now, this is in the wake of Donald Trump saying that he's going to rain fire and fury like no one's ever seen before in North Korea. And everybody went, oh, what? Except Sebastian Gorka, who did this on Fox.
He's saying don't test America and don't test Donald J. Trump. We are not just a superpower. We were a superpower. We are now a hyperpower. Nobody in the world, especially not North Korea, comes close to challenging our military capabilities.
I mean, I half expect him to say that we've got the dilithium crystals in the basement of the ship and we're going to go into hyperdrive any moment. What is he talking about? We are a hyperpower now.
I mean, look, as you were saying, for Donald Trump, his qualifications that he could go on TV and spew this type of ugliness and bizarreness and attack the press. He does that a lot. And so that's really, he's a gadfly who goes on TV, continues to fan the flames of white supremacy, neo-Nazism, and that's really his qualification. There's a story in Rolling Stone that says John Kelly has been trying to get rid of him and trying to figure out another place to put him in government, but nobody wants him.
Yeah, he's
Only
the unwanted.
Donald Trump wants him.
Maybe that's the reason for his sort of personality, is that being unwanted is painful, and maybe he's in pain. Gabriel Sherman, you study the sort of Fox world because he is also quite a frequent figure on Fox, and this kind of figure is very popular there, and we know Donald Trump watches that channel relentlessly. Is there a sense among the people who work in that world that they need to cultivate these kind of personalities, in part because it helps give people like Sean Hannity influence in the White House?
You know, I think that's a good question. You know, I don't think Fox has to cultivate Seb Gorka. I think it's actually, you know, the reverse, that he is willing to go on there and say the things that many of the Fox audience believe. I think if anything was revealed by the 2016 election is that the Fox audience really is the Trump base. And Fox has made the programming calculus that they need to reflect these worldviews really from a ratings programming perspective. I mean, just rewind to when Megyn Kelly was feuding with Donald Trump. Megyn Kelly's producers saw her ratings go down anytime she said something that was critical of Donald Trump. So the sort of amplification of these outrageous Trump voices that we see on Hannity or Fox and Friends is really appealing to the core Fox News viewer.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you guys now just a little bit about whether or not what happened in Charlottesville might actually change the calculus in terms of who's up, who's down in the White House. I want to start by pointing out that there's a report in Axios that was published this morning about Trump believing that Bannon is leaking and that his leaks are targeting General H.R. McMaster and that is putting Bannon's job in jeopardy. Kurt, could the one thing that helps Donald Trump dislodge, if he is of a mind to do so, the Bannonites, this idea that maybe he can push him out for leaking, if not for being in the alt-right?
Well, I feel like this is the third or fourth iteration of Trump's not happy with Steve Bannon that we've gone through in the last few months. First, it was the Time magazine cover and all of the portrayals of Steve as the man behind Trump, the brain behind Trump, which obviously he didn't like. Trump was upset about his cooperation and role in Joshua Green's book, which gave Steve co-billing with Donald Trump, The Devil's Bargain. And now, of course, it's this assault that we've seen from platforms like Breitbart, which Bannon probably still controls out of the White House, going after McMaster. And it's not a hard stretch for anyone to believe that it's coming from Steve or people controlled by Steve who work inside the White House. So, I mean, at some point, for all of the grandiose we see about we need to go after leaks and stop anonymous sources and all of that rhetoric from the White House and Attorney General Sessions, the likely biggest person who does this day in and day out is his chief strategist. Yeah,
is the guy with the blog. And Dana, this is H.R. McMaster this morning being much more definitive on what happened in Charlottesville. Let's take a listen.
I think what terrorism is the use of violence to incite terror and fear. And of course it was terrorism, but certainly I think we can confidently call it a form of terrorism.
Who is in a greater jeopardy of their job today, Steve Bannon or H.R. McMaster?
Well, McMaster is doing what you refer to as this cleanup. It's perpetual cleanup of what the president's been saying for 6 months now. But of course, McMaster has less staying power there. You have to understand that Bannon, Gorka, they're there because they speak to Trump's base. That half of the Republicans who would be perfectly happy with Trump suspending the 2020 election. You just can't go too far for that. Trump really can't get rid of them, or if he could individually, not for that segment of the White House that's speaking to these people. McMaster is expendable like everybody else.
And I wonder, Gabe, if in Fox world, well, you know what, well, very quickly, in Fox world, what would be the punishment? Who would be punished if McMaster would be pushed out? Would that shake the sort of Fox Trump base at all? Or would they just decide that, if you pushed out Bannon, then Bannon must have been a bad guy?
I think that's a good question. I think really their loyalty is to Donald Trump, not to Steve Bannon or the alt-right. And so I think, to the extent that they would program and want to reflect that decision to help Trump, I think that would be the calculus.
Yeah, I think if you can look to the change of mind on WikiLeaks as where they might go. It's just Trump, Trump, Trump. Karine Jean-Pierre sticking around. Dana Milbank, thank you very much. Gabe Sherman and Kurt Bardella, thank you guys. All right, and up next, more on what we know about the driver who rammed his car into protesters in Charlottesville, killing one and injuring many others. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.